Hello everyone. I'm not sure whether it's good morning or good afternoon, but surely it's afternoon here at my place. So welcome to the first recording of an online lecture. This is not live, it's just a recording. I'll be sharing this recording with you all. So it will not be long. I'll just pick a short topic as permulaan, as they say, because the system need to be tested too, and I'm not sure how you all can hear me. So if there is any disturbance, forgive me, because I'm right now outside my house and recording this. Okay, I intend to continue from the last lecture that we had, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I was giving a lecture on the topic of arrest and was about to go into search. So I will leave search for a moment because the next topic I intend to talk about is actually police investigation. So search and seizure is part of the police investigation. So I'm going to talk about it together. I'm going to talk about police investigation, and search and seizure will be inside the topic of police investigations. So we have covered arrest, and then the next topic, as I mentioned, is police investigation. What is police investigation, and where does investigation by the police fits into our system, our criminal justice system? Okay, as you're already aware, the system, the criminal justice system in this country is where the police will investigate, and then the DPP will prosecute, and the court will try the case. So what is police investigation? What's the purpose of this police investigation? The police investigate to gather evidence. Evidence gathered we compile in a file usually called the investigating papers, IP, and these investigation papers will be handed over to the DPP, the Deputy Public Prosecutor, who will peruse the IP and make a decision whether there is a case to prosecute or not. So if the DPP decide that there is sufficient evidence to get conviction, to prosecute the person, he will bring the case to court. He will go to court and present the case before court in a trial, and the court has to decide whether the person has been guilty or not of the charge that was preferred against him. Okay, what do the police do during police investigation? During police investigation, basically police receive information of an offense being committed. So after receiving the information, the police investigate, and basically, generally, what the police do is to gather evidence by collecting the exhibits, barang case that can prove that the offense is committed, taking down the statements of witnesses. The statements of the witnesses contain evidence from the witnesses themselves that should be able to prove that an offense has been committed, and making arrests for the person to be suspected to have committed the offense to be arrested and brought to court to face the charges against him. That's in a nutshell. So the topic begins with, before police investigation, the event. The first thing that started off all this police investigation is the police report. So police report are provided for under the CPC. Before that, on the general topic that I mentioned just now, whatever the police do during investigation or otherwise the police do, they have to act within their powers as provided for under the law. You all know that basically in this country, in our country, we have the Constitution. The Constitution guarantees the rights of every citizen in this country. Every individual has the right to life, to freedom, personal liberty, and right to property. So what the police do during investigation is basically to restrict the personal liberty of a person when making an arrest, and to seize property that is connected with the offences that is said to be done but to have been committed by the person. So the police can only do this when there is a law that provides for it, because the Constitution say that personal liberty is guaranteed and can only be taken away as provided for by the law. So the law here is whatever the Parliament have enacted, and the Parliament have enacted our CPC, the Police Act, and various other statutes that gives power to the enforcement agencies, and the police is just one of the foremost enforcement agencies in this country. And before we go into first information report, there is also the provision under section 103 to 107 or 106. What are section 103 to 106? It is the power of the police to prevent an offense from being committed, preventive action of the police. The police has got the power to interpose for the purpose of preventing and shall, to the best of his ability, using all lawful means, prevent the commission of any seizable offense. So if there is a seizable offense about to be committed, police has got the power to prevent it, and in exercising that power, he can use any measures that is lawful. Okay, and police also has to act on any information of a design to commit any seizable offense. If the police got any information that a seizable offense about to be committed, the police can take preventive action. And also the police can make arrests to prevent an offense from being committed. It was provided in section 105, the police officer, knowing of a design to commit any seizable offense, may arrest without orders from the magistrate and without the warrant the person so designing if appears to officer that the commission of the offense cannot be otherwise prevented. And also the police officer has got the power to prevent any injury to public property. Okay. Now on section 105, preventive power of the police, there is one case, the case of Mahfuz bin Omar against Inspector Muhammad Zaid bin Mazizat and 3 others. So this case happens a few years ago during the Bersih demonstrations. So what happened in this case is that the police arrested the accused in this case, Mahfuz bin Umar, because he is said to be involved or about to be involved in the demonstrations in KL, the Bersih demonstration, if you all remember, if you are following the news at that time. So Mahfuz Umar and a few others were actually arrested by the police before they can take part in the in the demonstration called the Bersih Information under the powers of section 105 to prevent the commission of a seizable offense. So the case went to court, and the judge in that case, or in this case, decided that section 105 was not proven, or the facts of the case, the facts and circumstances of the case is not sufficient to establish the ingredients under section 105. So that was based on the facts of the case, because according to the court, from the facts of the case, the accused persons was not arrested at the place where the demonstration is supposed to take place. They were actually arrested at the hotel, because they were at the hotel to make a press conference. So they were arrested at the hotel, not at the place where the demonstrations were supposed to have taken place. And they were there for a press conference. So it appears like they are not going to take part in the case. They are not taking part in the case. They are not about to take part in the demonstration. So they did not intend to commit any offense according to the court based on the facts of the case. So the provisions under section 105, their detention under section 105, the court says was unlawful. So there was just one example of the case under section 105, which is within the chapter between 103 to 106, sections 103 to 106, regarding the powers of the police to take preventive measures to prevent the commission of an offense. So that case has been decided on the facts of that case. So now, moving on. I'm going to talk about police report, generally known to the layman, to the public as police report, report police, laporan polis. You all know how important the police report nowadays. As you can see what's happening around us. Sikit-sikit pergi buat police report, sikit-sikit pergi buat police report. There are certain personalities who become famous just because they are fond of making police report. So what is it actually, police report? You look for the term police report under the CPC is not there. What we have is actually a first information report, which is under part 5, information to the police and their powers to investigate. Information to the police. So there is information of the commission of an offence or the commission of or the information of an offence about to be committed being reported to the police. So among the legal fraternity is usually referred to as FIR, First Information Report. So what is a First Information Report? You have to look at section 107 of the Criminal Procedure Code. It says that every information relating to the commission of an offence, if given orally to an officer in charge of police station, shall be reduced to writing by him or under his direction and be read over to the informant. And every such information shall be entered in a book to be kept by that officer who shall append to such entry the date and hour on which information is given, and whether given in writing or reduced to writing as aforesaid shall be signed by that person giving it. So what it means basically there, when a person comes and give a report to the police shall be entered into the book, shall keep a register, and in that register there shall be recorded the time and the date and whoever is the one giving information. So siapa yang pernah pergi balai polis buat report tu, I'm sure you have gone through this process. Pergi kat situ, tulis laporan, polis ambil bukti-bukti yang melaporkan, bila dan pukul berapa dan tarikh laporan itu dibuat. And those will be kept because for reasons that our state lead. And that's under section 107, subsection 1 and subsection 2, and then there is subsection 3, A and B. Subsection A provides that notwithstanding subsection 1, information given by a person relating to the commission of an offence to the police officer who at the time of receiving the information is not in the police station shall be deemed to be received at the police station. So because under 1071 it was mentioned that the officer who received the report is the officer in charge of a police station. So 103 makes a proviso, notwithstanding subsection 1, if that information was given not at a police station, it will be deemed to have been given at a police station. So why is this? Because nowadays we have not just the police station, we have the Pondok Polis, which is not exactly a police station, and we have Balai Polis Bergerak. If you've been to town, you go around town, sometimes you see a police van written there Balai Polis Bergerak, so they can take and receive reports there. So reports that have been taken down by the police either at the Pondok Polis or Balai Polis Bergerak is deemed to have been taken at the police station by virtue of section 1073A. And then 1073B, a police officer is receiving such information under paragraph A, where practicable, shall record, of course, to be recorded the name and address of the informant, the date and time of the receipt of such information, and shall convey such information to an officer in charge of police station, any police officer who is duty to receive such information. And then C, such information will be reduced in writing, entered in a book in accordance with subsection 1 and 2, and shall subsequently be signed by the person who gave the information. So this is repeating the same provision under section 1 and 2, but regarding information received by the police, not at the Balai Polis, not the police station, but at Balai Polis Bergerak, which is basically just a van or Pondok Police, which is not designated by the police, or whenever places where the police can receive a report. So the most important thing you have to keep in mind, all these provisions are first, that first information report, as we call it, the information given to the police officer is usually referred to as FIR, has to be reduced in writing, has to be recorded and kept in the book, and the particulars of the informant has to be recorded. So this can become important. And then a police officer shall be detained under 10, I'm reading 10.074, subsection 4. A police officer shall be duty bound to receive any information in relation to any offence committed anywhere in the police. Basically, what it says there, a police officer cannot refuse a report that anyone wants to report to the police, no matter how ridiculous it sounds. I'm sure you have come across, either in the media, whether social media or printed media, or some very ridiculous report that public has made. Personally, I've come across report where a person actually said that he was shot by an alien using a ray gun. Serious. It's not a joke. Somebody went to the police station, showed him some burn marks on his body, and say that aliens rounded down and shot him with a ray gun. Obviously, something wrong with that person. It's cuckoo or something, but the police still obliged to take down that report, open a file, and send it to a DBP, which was me at that time. And that was under section 1074, because the police is obliged to do so. Now, I've also come across situations where some people they've experienced a situation where the police in charge of police station are a bit reluctant to receive your report, especially when concerning private matters, some dispute or squabbles among a few individuals. Both sides also went to the police station, both want to lodge a report against the other, and the police sometimes will ask a few questions and seems to be like discouraging the people from lodging a police report. There have been complaints, not to say complaints. There have been some grouses, rungutan, and some presumptions, some assumptions being made that the police do not want to accept certain report because they do not want to investigate the case. And sometimes they may think the case is too trivial, only in the personal interest of certain people. But whatever it is, we all have to be aware. The police is still obliged to take down the report. So even if they are a bit reluctant in the police, we can insist, the public can insist that their report be taken, and the police can do nothing about it. They still have to take down that report because it's an obligation on their part. Tapi itu cuma perkara-perkara yang jadi bualan awam. It's just perceptions, public perceptions. But in reality, under the law, the police cannot refuse to take down the report because of section 107, subsection 4. So as lawyers, we have to be aware of that. Now, when the report has been lodged, before I go further, who are the people who can lodge a report? I think this you can see in your textbook at page 150, eyewitness. Your textbook at page 150, and by textbook here, I'm referring to Bajik Sinsidu, Criminal Litigation Process. This seems to be a very popular book among the students. So first is eyewitnesses. Eyewitness, a person who saw an offense being committed, went to the police and lodged a report. That's quite easy. And then victims or aggrieved person who are victims of a crime. orang curi barang kita ke, whatever, mangsa rogol, mangsa rompak, mangsa whatsoever, they are victims. They go to the police, they lodge. Passerby or hearsay. Passerby or hearsay is just that disinterested people, they hear certain information and which perhaps to them is of importance that the police needs to investigate, so they go to the police and lodge a report. And this is the one that I mentioned just now. You see in the media sometimes some people become famous by just lodging a police report. Usually is on issues concerning their interest, whether political or otherwise. Somebody watching a video on YouTube saw that, for example, an animal being tortured, animal being killed, so they are not happy about it because they are animal lovers, so they lodge a police report based on what they saw. Okay, they can do that, no problem. And then police officer having knowledge or suspect the occurrence of any crime. So police, as you know, they always go ronda, they always go looking around, sniffing around, trying to prevent crimes being committed. So if they have knowledge that a crime is about to be committed or crime has been committed, then they themselves can lodge a police report. So this usually happens dalam operasi polis lah, yang mana tidak ada pengadu, tidak ada anybody coming forward to lodge a report. The police just launch an operation, discover an offence being committed, they themselves will lodge a report. And then person aware of the occurrence of an offence without having personal knowledge. Even if you don't have the personal knowledge, but you are aware an offence has been committed, yes, you can lodge a report. And this is something, the example is similar to what I said just now. Relative or friend or well-wisher of the aggrieved person. So your friend, your relative become a victim of a crime, you can go and lodge a police report, even your neighbor. And also the accused himself, this is quite common. The accused himself will actually lodge a police report, whether they commit a crime or not. Sometimes they committed a crime, and for some reason or other, they themselves went to the police station and lodged a police report. I committed this, I committed that. Sometimes they went to lodge a report on something else. It turns out they are the one, after investigation, it turns out they are the one who started the whole thing, or actually the cause of the problem that has become the subject matter of the crime, and they might end up being an accused person themselves. So we'll come across such cases. Banyak kes yang mana the accused himself, orang yang lodge report, later on they themselves become the accused. This is not unusual, this is quite common. Okay, these are the people who can lodge a police report. Now, a first information report. In the whole scheme of things, as I already mentioned just now, first information report is actually the first step dalam police investigation. Other than that, secara umum, I'm talking generally here, after receiving a report, what the next thing the police will do is to investigate, and by investigating, they have to record statement from witnesses, cari barang case, make a search for the offending articles or anything related to the commission of the offence, and make arrest the person suspected to have committed the offence. So these are the general process. It all begins with the first information report, the police report. The first information report, which is covered by section 107, I've mentioned just now. So dari segi keterangan, now I go a little bit into the topic of evidence. This is in relation to evidence, which you all have learned as a separate subject, a matter of evidence. In evidence, what is the value of the police report? Evidentiary value of a police report or a first information report. The evidentiary value of a first information report. Okay. This topic has got some connection, some relation with a bigger topic of issues regarding a police report. There is the police report to initiate an investigation provided for under the Criminal Procedure Code, and in court, when the case finally goes to trial, when the case went for trial, during trial, what are the issues usually raised by the parties during the trial itself regarding the first information report? So there are many issues. I will go one by one. So one of it is, what is the value of this first information report? So on this topic, I would like first to go as an illustration, go to the case of Tan Cheng Kui against another, and that's another also important case, Balachandran against PP. Okay, Tan Cheng Kui. The case of Tan Cheng Kui against another against PP, 1972, 2 MLJ at page 115, and the citation mentioned in your textbook is actually at page 118. So you can see the passage from that case at page 150 of your textbook. At page 150 of textbook, stated there, I'm reading it, with regard to the evidentiary value of a first information report, Chang Min Tat, Justice Chan Min Tat, as he then was, cited Kandaf J, Justice Kandaf, and said in Tan Cheng Kui, in this case Tan Cheng Kui. Now this is important for you to understand. Now, the importance of a first information report has been stressed in a number of decisions. It is not a substantive piece of evidence, and it is inadmissible for the purpose of proving that the facts stated in it are correct. But it can be used by way of corroboration or contradiction. To corroborate or to contradict the author, that means the maker of that report. I will explain shortly. Okay, and Augustine Paul, Justice Augustine Paul, Judge of the Court of Appeal, in the case of Balachandran against Public Prosecutor, cited at 2005 1 AMR or Malaysia Report, 2005 2 MLJ 301. This is what Justice Augustine Paul said. The passage just referred to makes it patent that the evidentiary value of a first information report is only to contradict the testimony of a witness under Section 145 of the Evidence Act 1950, or to corroborate his testimony under Section 157 of the Act. It is not substantive evidence of its content. So apa maksud di sini? Okay, I go back to the first information report. It is not substantive piece of evidence, and it is inadmissible for the purpose of proving that the facts stated in it are correct. Apa maksud di sini? Satu first information report tu, kandungan dia, the contents of it. The contents of it is not a piece of substantive evidence. Bukan keterangan yang substantif, yang penting, yang utama. And it is inadmissible for the purpose of proving the facts stated in it. Dia tidak boleh dikemukakan untuk membuktikan kenyataan di dalam. Kenapa macam tu? Simple, because a police report is hearsay. Dia adalah satu keterangan pandang dengar. So because of that, is inadmissible. Kandungan police report itu tidak boleh digunakan sebagai bukti untuk menyokong apa yang dikatakan di dalamnya. That's the general rule. Okey, sebagai contoh saya buat macam ni lah. Katakanlah saya pergi balai polis sebab barang saya hilang. Katakanlah saya kehilangan satu barang dan saya syak barang itu telah dicuri oleh jiran sebelah. So saya pergi ke balai polis, saya buat satu laporan polis mengatakan bahawa jiran saya telah mencuri barang saya. That's the facts, the content of my police report. Saya melaporkan pada polis sekarang bahawa jiran saya curi barang saya. That's the content of the report. Now, katakanlah jiran tu nanti ditangkap polis dan dituduh di mahkamah. Dia telah dituduhkan di mahkamah dan report itu dikemukakan sebagai keterangan. Ini adalah satu laporan polis yang mengatakan bahawa kamu telah mencuri barang jiran kamu. This is a case against. Now, the contents of the report cannot be used as proof that jiran itu telah curi barang saya. Sebab itu apa yang saya cakap dalam balai polis, it's hearsay. So they cannot rely on the contents of the report sahaja untuk mensabitkan seseorang. You cannot just rely on the contents of a report. Report macam-macam kata, tapi you cannot rely on the contents of report untuk mengatakan, untuk membuktikan kesalahan itu. Dalam kes tadi, maka kalau jiran saya itu dituduh di mahkamah, masih perlu dibuktikan bahawa jiran itu curi barang saya. Maknanya saya kena pergi ke mahkamah. Dan kalau saya nampak, saya kena ceritakan kepada mahkamah apa yang saya nampak. Saya nampak jiran saya, dia datang rumah saya, dia ambil barang tu, lepas tu dia pun keluar balik. That is evidence because that's what I see, not apa yang sebut dalam report. Because that's what I told the police. So I hope you understand kenapa contents of the report is not relevant, it's not substantive evidence. Tetapi dalam beberapa keadaan, ini yang jadi isu yang nak dicerita ni, dalam beberapa keadaan, contents of report can be important. Disebut di sini dalam Tan Cheng Kui dengan Balachandran, case 2 yang saya state tadi, it can be used by way of corroboration or contradiction. Boleh menyokong atau boleh kontradik. Ini selalunya jadi isu. So, saya boleh buat satu contoh yang paling senang yang saya tahu buat selalu, sebab saya selalu kerap berjumpa kes macam gini. Oleh sebab saya kerap berjumpa kes macam gini, jadi saya selalu buat contoh. Saya jumpa semasa dari pengalaman kerja lah, selalu terjadi dalam kes robot. Contoh, kenapa police report tu penting? Okay. Kandungan police report tu tak penting. Because macam disebut tadi, the contents of police report is not substantive evidence. Tapi you kena remember, the police report is still evidence, but it is only evidence of the fact that a report being made. Saya telah membuat satu laporan polis, itu keterangan di mahkamah. So, mana laporannya? Ini dia salinan laporan yang saya buat. So that salinan laporan yang saya kemukakan itu is only to prove the fact that I've made a police report, not to prove its content. So I hope you can understand this, and if you need further explanation of what I'm saying here, you can always contact me either through WhatsApp ataupun chat dalam Microsoft Teams, and I will try my best to answer you. So balik kepada contoh kes robot, bayangkan kepada keadaan ini. Seseorang itu dituduh merogol. Dituduh merogol di mahkamah. Dan yang disaksinya adalah mangsa. Mangsa yang dikatakan telah dirogol. Itu adalah saksi yang memberi keterangan kepada tertuduh yang dituduh sebagai telah merogol mangsa. So dalam kes rogol, satu isu yang penting adalah consent. As you all know, dalam kes rogol, sexual intercourse without consent, unless tolak tepi yang bawah umur tu lah, sexual intercourse without consent baru jadi rape. So sexual intercourse with consent is not rape. So selalu yang berlaku isu yang terjadi dalam perbicaraan kes rogo adalah sama ada the so-called victim, orang yang dikatakan dirogo, saksi tentang keterangan tu, whether she consented or not. Okay. Accused will say dia suka semua suka. She consented. The victim, the witness will say that no, I never consent to this. I never consent to sexual intercourse. Dia paksakan atas saya. So nak dengar mana satu? If you are the court, you have the session court here in this case. Which one is more probable antara dua keterangan ni, one against one? Yalah, perkara dah berlaku, tak ada orang lain melihat, tak ada saksi, tak ada apa. So kejadian berlaku di satu tempat, mangsa kata she never consented, accused kata she consented. So dalam kes keadaan macam ni, what can tip the balance of probability? Okay, kalau ada police report dikemukakan, kalau ada police report dikemukakan, at least the very least is this. I'm not making a rule here. Dia tak ada rule dalam perbicaraan mana yang lebih probable mana. I'm not making a rule. But you bayangkan keadaan tadi, dalam keadaan di mana mangsa tu kata saya tidak rela dengan perbuatan ni, okay? I think dalam great cases you all should know lah, you all are aware kan, the fact that you setuju pergi rumah, you setuju keluar dengan lelaki, itu doesn't mean that you consented to sex. Katakanlah you setuju keluar pergi makan, doesn't mean that you consented to sex. Kalau you setuju pergi tengok wayang, doesn't mean that you consented to sex. Even if you setuju pergi rumah dia, budak perempuan pergi rumah bujang lelaki, doesn't mean that the perempuan is consented to sex. Ini satu perception yang I'm taking this opportunity nak betulkan sikit lah, kan? Because kalau ikut what the saying, some people say even prostitute also can be raped. Tak semestinya kalau dia of loose moral ke whatsoever, maknanya she will consent to sex all the time. On that particular happening, did she consent or not? Dia pergi rumah budak lelaki itu, doesn't mean that she consented to sex. So apa yang boleh tip the balance probability tadi? Macam saya bagi contoh dalam contoh saya ni, katakanlah perempuan tu or the victim bagi evidence dekat court, I never consented to the sexual intercourse, the sexual act, and when it happens, I don't like it. I straight away went to the police station and lodged a report. Okey, bayangkan keadaan ini, keterangan ini, bayangkan keterangan yang sebut tadi, yang mana fakta menunjukkan bahawa dia ni selepas berlaku pelakuan seks itu telah pergi melaporkan kepada polis bahawa dia telah dirogol. Bayangkan keadaan ini dengan satu keadaan lain yang mana dia kata dia tidak rela, tetapi selepas kejadian dia tak ada buat laporan polis sampai kes, sampai mahkamah, tak pernah buat laporan polis. Laporan polis later was actually made by somebody else. Dalam kes kebanyakan dibuat lima. Okey, dalam keadaan yang laporan itu dibuat oleh orang lain and she herself never make a report. So dalam dua keadaan ini, seorang saksi mengatakan bahawa dia telah dirogol. Satu keadaan, saksi itu mengatakan bahawa selepas kejadian dia terus buat report polis mengatakan dia dirogol. Dalam satu lagi kejadian, dia kata dia tidak rela dirogol tapi dia tak buat laporan polis. Not that laporan polis itu adalah essential ingredient untuk kes rogol, because there are so many reasons kenapa orang tak buat laporan polis. Mungkin sebab stigma, takut malu dan sebagainya, especially kalau yang merogol itu is somebody close to them, yang ada relationship something whatsoever. Tetapi dari segi probability of evidence, antara dua ni, mana yang lebih berat nilai keterangannya. That is the issue yang disebutkan di sini lah, credibility. Which is more credible? Seorang mengatakan saya dirogol dan pergi buat laporan polis, seorang mengatakan saya dirogol dan tidak buat laporan polis. Mana yang lebih credible? Of course, the one who said that saya dirogol dan pergi buat laporan polis adalah mempunyai lebih credibility. I'm talking generally here. So in that case, laporan polis tu has become a corroboration. So dia boleh diterima. Kalau ikut kes Tan Cheng Kui dengan Bala Chandran ni, laporan polis tu even though is not substantive evidence of its content, dia bukan substantive evidence of its content, tetapi dia boleh menjadi satu corroboration. The fact that a report was lodged and that report melaporkan kejadian apa yang berlaku itu corroborates credibility saksi itu, kebolehpercayaan dia. So I hope you are getting what I'm trying to express here. So sama juga, selain daripada boleh corroborate, dia juga boleh contradict. Kalau keterangan yang dikemuka di mahkamah lain, tetapi dalam laporan polis kata lain. So walaupun laporan polis itu bukan substantive evidence, tetapi now kandungan itu boleh digunakan untuk kontradik keterangan di mahkamah. Katakanlah seorang, I think ambil contoh kes Rogo tadi senang. Katakanlah seorang itu dia mengatakan dalam keterangan di mahkamah, dia kata saya telah dirogol oleh seorang yang bernama Abu rogol dia dalam keterangan di mahkamah. Tapi dalam laporan polis dia kata yang merogol dia adalah Ali. That again adalah satu contradiction yang menjejaskan credibility dia, maka jadi relevant walaupun pada asalnya ialah ada tidak relevant. So this secara umum adalah di basis, daripada basis inilah kita go deeper dalam evidentiary value of a police report. Kita pergi lebih lanjut daripada asas ini. Asas ni yang you have to remember is not substantive evidence, tapi dia boleh jadi corroboration atau contradiction. Because a police report is not proof of its content, but only proof of its content, mana not proof the commission of the offence. Kalau you kata tuduh seorang mencuri, you cannot just tender police report as proof bahawa dia mencuri. You still have to prove perbuatan dia mencuri by evidence. So apa yang ada dalam police report itu is just hearsay. It's not substantive evidence, tapi it's proof that the report has been made. Okay, I hope you understand that, because if I go further, I think I will only be repeating myself. Okay. Report is not substantive evidence, it's not it's just an information. Satu lagi tadi aku sebut, police report is just an information that initiates the police, yang memulakan satu siasatan oleh pihak polis. So, berdasarkan kepada itu, satu lagi isu yang sering timbul adalah police report lain, keterangan di mahkamah lain. Selalunya itulah yang berlaku. Because, satu, semasa police report dibuat, apa yang sebenarnya terjadi belum diketahui sepenuhnya. That's quite umum lah, general. Satunya, police report ini very ringkas. Dia bukannya keterangan yang lebih detail. Dia ringkas. Dan police report juga dibuat ketika you don't have the maker of the report didn't really know what happened. Dia cuma dapat maklumat, dia cuma nampak sesuatu, dia pergi buat police report. And then it may happen that lepas siasatan sebenarnya perkara lain yang telah berlaku sebenarnya. I think many examples kita boleh buat benda ni lah kan. Ini something yang selalu berlaku dalam hidup kita lah. Nampak aja tu pergi buat police report. Siasat-siasat rupanya, oh bukan macam tu sebenarnya. That basically is. Tetapi ada dalam keadaan ini, police report selalu tak biasa dengan percakapan yang diberi pada polis, keterangan di mahkamah. Ingat proses yang saya sebut awal tadi? Proses yang sebut awal tadi macam ini. Seorang itu pergi buat satu laporan polis, kemudian polis mensiasat. Polis siasat dengan merakamkan percakapan. My next topic is going to be the recording of statements of witnesses. Okay. Polis akan record statement of witnesses under section 112, 113 dan sebagainya. And then police will also collect exhibits, akan buat rampasan atas barang kes dan sebagainya yang berkait dengan kesalahan. And also will interview the accused person, dapatkan keterangan daripada orang yang dikatakan melakukan kesalahan itu juga. So as you can see, selepas report tu baru siasatan berjalan. And akan berlaku macam percanggahan antara police report tu sama ada dengan statement given to the police atau keterangan yang telah diberikan di mahkamah. So secara umumnya perbezaan-perbezaan ini understandable. It's just a police report to initiate information. So there are bound to be differences dengan keterangan ataupun apa yang telah diberikan di mahkamah. But if you look at the cases, there are bukan saja cases, balik kepada apa yang saya kata awal tadi, corroboration and contradiction. There are sometimes the contradiction, perbezaan itu terlalu ketara so that it becomes material. So apa yang sebut kat sini, when material facts are being omitted from the police report. Dia buat police report je, tapi polis siasat ada kesalahan berlaku. Tetapi dalam police report dengan hasil siasatan ataupun keterangan di mahkamah tu, the omission, apa yang ditinggalkan dalam police report itu terlalu ketara. Kita perlu ingat, police report doesn't detail out everything. Dia very ringkas. Contohnya report kemalangan jalan raya. Saya nampak sebuah kereta, saya tak tahu jenis apa tapi warna hitam. That's all I say. Ya. Kereta yang tak tahu jenis apa, nombor apa, warna hitam. That's all I say. Tapi lepas siasatan didapati kereta itu adalah sebuah kereta BMW 320i warna hitam dengan plate number WQT 9986. So is that material omission? Bergantung kepada keadaan kes itu. So that may not be material. Tetapi kalau dia buat police report, dia kata dia nampak kemalangan itu berlaku melibatkan sebuah lori warna merah. After investigation, it turns out it's not lori tapi sebuah kereta BMW warna hitam. No, antara dua omission tadi besar perbezaan dia. One may not be material, the other may be very material. Macam mana kereta boleh pergi dekat lori? Kan? Itu contohlah yang kita boleh tengok dalam kes Lee Ah Seng. Satu kes yang di-refer to dalam you punya textbook ni is kes Lee Ah Seng. Saya baca kat sini. This is page 152 dalam you punya textbook, page 152. The accuracy of the FAR is relevant to the credibility and truthfulness of the witness or complainant to a certain extent. This saya dah mention tadi, based on case apa, Tan Cheng Kui dengan Balachandran. Based on this is a repeat of Tan Cheng Kui Balachandran. The accuracy of the FAR is relevant to the credibility and truthfulness of the witness or complainant to a certain extent. To a certain extent saja. Bukan keterangan substantif, tapi relevant dalam isu credibility dia. So nak menentukan isu credibility ni, tengok the next thing is macam mana kalau ada omission perkara-perkara yang ditinggalkan. There are omissions from the report that he made. So dalam kes ni kita tengok dalam kes ni, in this case the veracity of the seven prosecution witness whose evidence was the only evidence that implicated the involvement of appellants in a murder of one Sanip was brought into question as a result of several discrepancies inter alia between the FIR inmate and his testimonial evidence. In addition, the chemist's evidence merely established the cause of death, and the intention of the cause of death did not establish the identity of the offenders. Hence, the federal court set aside the offender's conviction and sentence and gave the following reasoning. This is what an extract from the decision daripada case Lee Ah Seng against and another against PP. On the discrepancies, the most prominent and significant was SP7's omission to mention in the FIR the involvement of the appellants and the alleged pursuit of Sanip after he came out of his shack. The omission was not one of mere detail, but of the important second half of the events that were related in evidence. The deliberate failure of SP7 to mention in the FIR the second half of the incident, including the appellant's involvement in it, should have given cause to the learned trial judge to be very careful about accepting SP7's evidence of the appellant's complicity in the crime. Of course, if there was a reasonable explanation for the failure, it should not have effect on the veracity of SP7. On the facts, the reason he gave for the failure was inherently improbable. It is unnatural for a person who claims to have seen another commit a crime to report the crime yet withhold the identity of the perpetrator. Because the purpose of reporting the crime is to bring the wrongdoer to justice, it would require a very strong reason to deter one from revealing the culprit. However, the reason given by SP7 was extremely weak. He failed to give a reasonable explanation for the omission. The truth of his evidence became open to at least a reasonable doubt. That and the doubt as to SP7's veracity in the application implicating the appellants in the incident rendered the appellant's conviction unsafe. Bacalah sendiri daripada textbook you ni, and I will explain to you now what it means. So apa berlaku dalam kes ni? Isu dia adalah macam saya sebut tadi, adalah bermula daripada isu credibility, sama ada corroboration ataupun contradiction. Police report bukan substantive evidence, tapi boleh menjejaskan credibility sebab dia boleh corroborate atau contradict, macam mana contoh saya bagi tadi, macam dalam kes logo tadi. So apa je berlaku dalam kes kes Lee Ah Seng ini adalah satu omission, ketinggalan. Now, an omission biasanya is not a contradiction. Tetapi kalau that omission is very material, glaring, then it can become a contradiction. So ni satu contoh satu kes yang mana dibincangkan di mahkamah lah. So apa yang ditinggalkan dalam kes ni adalah satu kes murder. Saksinya adalah dalam kes pembunuhan. Yang dibunuh adalah seorang yang bernama Sanip dan dibunuh oleh orang yang dituduh Lee Ah Seng dan another. Ini yang dikatakan telah membunuh. Saksinya ada seorang, SP7. SP7 ni adalah saksi yang katanya nampak kejadian bunuh ni. Tetapi dalam report polis ni dia hanya menceritakan kejadian macam mana dia menceritakan kejadian macam mana dia menceritakan tentang, I'm not so sure exactly dia punya report kat sini, tapi apa yang ditinggalkan di sini dalam report dia ada ketinggalan. Dia melaporkan tentang pembunuhan tu, Sanip dibunuh, tetapi dalam report dia tidak menyebutkan bagaimana Sanip dibunuh dan siapa yang membunuh Sanip. So this is what the court is discussing. Apa yang dibincang oleh mahkamah di sini. Dia buat report. Tapi dalam report dia tak sebut siapa yang bunuh dan macam mana cara dia dibunuh. Sedangkan dia tahu, kenal orang itu dan dia nampak pembunuhan itu berlaku. So this is what troubling the court dalam kes ni. Nampak kejadian bunuh, you kenal siapa yang bunuh, kenal orang tu, you nampak macam mana dia bunuh, tapi tak sebut dalam report, cuma di mahkamah baru ceritakan. So the court kat sini kata the deliberate failure of SP7 to mention in the FIR the second half of the incident, kejadian macam mana dibunuh tu is the second half of the incident. Dia cerita separuh je, separuh lagi dia tak cerita. Second half of the incident, including the appellants involved in it, termasuk macam mana boleh membabitkan tertuduh-tertuduh dalam kes ni. appellants involved in it should have given cause to the learned trial judge to be very careful about accepting evidence of the appellant's complicity in the crime. So dalam kes ni, Mahkamah Rayuan berpendapat, bukan pendapat lah, rayuan mahkamah, dia boleh baca lah, boleh baca apa yang dalam pemikiran Mahkamah Federal Court dalam kes ni. You can read what they are thinking about. Bila berlaku satu kejadian, and then saksi yang nampak kejadian tu cuma cerita separuh saja. Dia tak cerita lagi separuh tu. Macam mana dibunuh, siapa yang membunuh tu dia tak cerita. Cuma dalam mahkamah baru dia cerita, oh dia yang bunuh, dia yang bunuh, dia yang bunuh, dia yang bunuh. So, dia telah menjemunyi, dia omitted part of the story. Dia omitted. So, apa yang hakim kat sini, hakim patut very careful menerima keterangan dia sebab tak jelas kenapa dia menyembunyikan beberapa perkara dalam police report dia, dan dia punya kemungkinan complicity dia dalam jenayah itu, his own complicity, peranan dia dalam jenayah. Kenapa mahkamah fikir macam gini? Kenapa mahkamah fikir macam ni? Because adalah sesuatu yang sering berlaku, logik, saya tak tahu nak sebut macam mana, tapi satu yang natural. Apabila kita sama-sama terlibat dalam satu jenayah, there is a tendency untuk kita menyelamatkan diri kita dengan menolak kesalahan itu pada orang lain. There is this danger. So this is the danger that the court is actually warning us about without telling so much. So apa yang berlaku dalam kes ni, saksi SP7 ni, dalam report dia sembunyikan beberapa perkara, dan perkara itu hanya dibangkitkan di dalam mahkamah, dan ini menyebabkan kredibiliti dia terjejas sebab ada keraguan tentang peranan dia dalam kejadian itu sendiri. I hope you are following what I'm trying to say here. What I'm trying to say of my own view of why the court decided like this, and why the court menganggapkan the omission dalam police report itu adalah sesuatu yang material, menjejaskan kredibiliti. Walaupun pada asasnya an omission is not a contradiction, tetapi kadang-kadang satu omission itu kalau terlalu material, terlalu penting, it becomes material. Okay, this is an example. Memang on the facts of this case, mahkamah mengatakan this is a material omission because it can cast doubts on the case. Apa doubtnya? Doubtnya adalah siapa sebenarnya yang bunuh. Okay. It will require a very strong reason to deter one from revealing the culprit. Apa mahkamah kata selanjutnya? Kalaulah SP7 boleh explain kenapa dia omit, kenapa dia menyembunyikan. Macam contoh saya bagi kejadian aksiden tadi. Oh, saya nampak sebuah kereta warna hitam, tapi jenis kereta saya tak tahu. Okey, contoh macam inilah. Saya nampak sebuah kereta, saya nampak si mati dilanggar oleh sebuah kereta warna hitam. Lepas tu dalam soal balas ditanya, kereta jenis apa? Oh, saya tak tahu jenis apa. Apa nombor kereta? Oh, saya tak tahu apa nombor kereta. There is an omission there, dia sebut kereta warna hitam, tapi dia tak tahu nombor apa semua. Kemudian dia explain. Kenapa, macam mana boleh tak tahu? Oh, saya tak tahu sebab kejadian berlaku dengan cepat. Saya cuma nampak kereta hitam. Lepas tu kereta tu terus jalan. Saya tak sempat nak tengok nombor dia. Saya pun tak tahu, tak sempat nak tengok jenis dia apa. So dia punya omission tu has been explained. There is a logical explanation, reasonable explanation to why dia omit. Contohlah. Tapi dalam kes ni, there is no satisfactory explanation kenapa dia tak sebut pembabitan orang-orang ni semua semasa dia buat police report. You nampak orang ni bunuh orang ni, kata dia lah dalam keterangan dia, tapi masa buat report tu dia tak sebut pula orang tu yang bunuh. Kenapa tak sebut masa tu? Kenapa sekarang baru sebut? Kalau dia ada explanation, for example, oh pada masa tu saya tak tahu nama dia, saya kenal dia tapi saya tak tahu nama dia, that is actually an explanation. Sekarang baru saya tahu nama dia, that's why saya sebut sekarang. That is an example of a reasonable explanation. Tetapi apa berlaku kat sini? There is no reasonable explanation. So, it would require a very strong reason to deter one for revealing the culprit. However, the reason given by SP7 was extremely weak. He failed to give a reasonable explanation for the omission. The truth of his evidence became open to at least a reasonable doubt. So, apabila you tak sebut dalam you punya police report satu perkara yang material, yang you ketahui, tapi you tak sebut, macam sengaja menyembunyikan, and then there is no reasonable explanation, that means your credibility dah affected. So bila you are the only witness in this case, and then you credibility affected, then there is already a reasonable doubt in that case. Okay, I hope you understand apa yang cuba saya sampaikan ni daripada decision dalam kes Lee Ah Seng berkaitan dengan omission to mention a particular fact dalam satu first information report. Okey, kes Lee Ah Seng ini dalam kes He Chun Sing, dalam kes He Chun Sing apa yang berlaku adalah a report was made to the constable and the complainant identified the appellant but the constable omitted the identification in the FIR. Ini constable sendiri yang tak tulis, orang tu dah sebut nama dia. So, Justice Ong Kok Tai endorse Sohoni's commentary. Ini dia refer balik kepada Sohoni's punya Indian CPC lah. I hope you tahu buku Sohoni ni untuk pelajar-pelajar CPC. Sohoni ini macam dia punya buku rujukan utama. But it cannot be said that the omission of the first information will always be of no significance. The report is not substantive evidence, saya dah cakap tadi, and omission in will not ipso facto lead to the case being thrown out. First information report is not substantive evidence. Satu omission bukan bermakna automatic case akan terus dibuang. But it is a piece of corroborative evidence. Omission in it will, other things being the same, deprive the prosecution the most valuable corroboration and by make the story suspicious. Itu saja. So bila tak ada corroboration tu, prosecution kekurangan satu keterangan lah. So bila kekurangan satu keterangan tu, mana kes dia lemah. Itu saja. When the first information report contains an omission to an important but fact relied upon by the prosecution, the omission is important and in the absence of any other evidence, the court may in a given case refuse to consider evidence or the informant of fact because of such omission. Kalau ada sesuatu omission tu, ni ulangan simpulan apa yang telah sebutkan. Satu omission tu kalau dia important, fact relied upon by the prosecution, and then the omission is important and in the absence of any other evidence. In the absence of any other evidence, tak ada keterangan lain. You bergantung pada satu saksi ni. Saksi ni pula dia punya credibility dah affected. Kenapa credibility affected? Sebab dia omit something important dalam dia punya police report. And tak ada keterangan lain. So, dalam keadaan macam tu, the court may in a given case refuse to consider the evidence of the informant on the fact of such important omission. So, mahkamah bolehlah untuk tidak menerima keterangan saksi tu. Sebab you telah meninggalkan satu fakta yang penting dalam you punya laporan polis yang sepatutnya kamu tahu. Okay. In summary, accuracy of FIR will not be a ground for the court to dismiss a case. However, there is any contradictions, the court will exercise its caution in making the evidence if it's significant. The court may dismiss a case. So kesimpulannya, ketidakketepatan, if something in the police report this is not accurate, is not a ground for the court to immediately dismiss the case. Oh, police report kamu tak sebut ini, tak sebut itu, dengan ini, kes dibuang. No. Saya dah cerita panjang tadi. Cuma dalam keadaan di mana that contradiction cuma akan meletakkan mahkamah lebih berhati-hati sebelum menerima keterangan. And if it's significant, the court may dismiss the case. Sebelum nak terima keterangan daripada saksi ni, kena berhati-hati sebab dia telah tidak menceritakan beberapa perkara penting di dalam laporan polis yang sepatutnya dia boleh ceritakan. dan dia tiada alasan menceritakan. So therefore court berhati-hati daripada menerima keterangan dia. Dan kalau tidak ada keterangan lain bergantung pada keterangan dia sahaja, then the court can dismiss the case. So itu adalah satu apa boleh dikatakan kepentingan dari segi keterangan lah untuk satu first information report, the evidentiary value of the FIR. Seterusnya, Section 107 tadi kata apa? Semua first information report must be reduced into writing. Apa isunya? Okay, I think I will just go sekali lalu saja because from here what we are going to go on from here is basically on the same topic yang I dah bangkitkan, cuma dia lebih lanjut. Okay. Failure to reduce into writing, whether need to reduce the first information into writing. Of course, section 107 dah kata must be reduced into writing. So what happen kalau dia not reduced into writing? So kita tengok dalam kes Fong Chi Cheong. Fong Chi Cheong at page 154 of your textbook. Fong Chi Cheong, citation dia 170, 1 MLG 97. Case of extortion, section 3A4 Penal Code. Magistrate acquitted the accused at the close of the prosecution's case without calling his defense on the ground that since the FIR had not been reduced into writing, the police had no power to act and consequently the arrest was void in law. Okay. Well, the magistrate was not wrong to think like that, because kalau you ingat daripada awal lecture saya tadi, from the beginning I said just now that the police report is the beginning. The first information report is what initiate a police investigation, what started a police investigation. The police investigation started from a first investigation report, and the first investigation report is required under the CPC to be reduced into writing. So, question, can the police investigate without a first information report? And if the first information report is not reduced into writing, does that mean that there is no first information report? So kalau tak ada report, boleh ke polis siasat? Boleh tak seorang itu kata, polis tidak boleh siasat kes ini, siasatan ini adalah tak sah, pendakwaan kes ini adalah tak sah. Kenapa? Sebab tiada report dibuat. So kita tengok balik kepada decision dalam Fong Chi Cheong, apa court kata. Okay, the public prosecutor appeal to the High Court, and this is Justice Gill disagreed with the findings of the magistrate. Okay, Justice Gill, High Court dalam kes ni dia tak setuju dengan rayuan dibuat ke Mahkamah Tinggi oleh pihak pendakwaan, dan pihak Mahkamah Tinggi tidak bersetuju dengan keputusan magistrate. Following the decision in Emperor against Khwaja Nazir Ahmad, this is an Indian case, 1945 punya case, mana decision dah lama. The first information report is not a condition precedent to start a criminal investigation. Thus, failure to reduce the FIR into writing is not a ground to throw out a case. So this we have to remember. The first information report is not a condition precedent to the police investigation. Yes, police kena investigate. Bila ada police report dibuat, police kena investigate. Police report started the police investigation. So bila ada report, polis mesti investigate. Tetapi tidak bermakna kalau tiada report, polis tak boleh investigate. How do you explain this situation? Nantilah saya fikirkan macam mana nak explain that situation. But yang important remember now, bukan syarat untuk memulakan satu police investigation tu mesti ada police report. No, that's not the case. So, when the FIR is reduced into writing after commencing the investigation, as in this case, is not admissible in evidence but can be used to impeach the credit of person making it. Since FIR is not admissible, the adverse influence of Section 104G of Evidence Act cannot be drawn. Although the FIR is not admissible, there was a prima facie case for the accused to answer. So, sambung daripada case tadi, His Lordship ordered the respondent accused to be tried before another magistrate. It should be noted that this case implies that if the FIR is reduced into writing in Section 107 CBC before investigation is not reduced to evidence at trial, then the court may make adverse influence against public prosecutor in Section 4G. In addition, public prosecutor can establish malpractice against I think you can read it from there. Tapi saya nak explain keadaan-keadaan macam ni. These are the situation that you have to understand. First of all, when the first information report is admissible as evidence because the law says so. Dalam undang-undang memperuntukkan bahawa first information report boleh diterima sebagai keterangan as bukti bahawa satu report telah dibuat. It must be remembered the basis the first information report is hearsay. Azan tengah bunyi, so kita break sekejap untuk azan. Tetapi walaupun break untuk azan, saya tak boleh nak off recording ni, sebab kalau off kan nanti jadi video lain, jadi second part. So you just have to bear with me. Tunggu sekejap. Okay, just tunggu sampai azan selesai dulu. Okay, I'm back. Sambung balik. Kat mana tadi? When there is no report, the investigation and prosecution is still valid under the law. Prosecution and investigation is not does not rest on the condition that there must be a police report. Let's put it that way. Now, dalam keadaan macam mana selalunya benda ni timbul? Apa yang berlaku dalam kes Fong Chi Chiong ni? Dia dapat maklumat tentang berlakunya satu extortion. So, dia siasat dulu, baru kemudian dia buat report. So, that report is actually no longer first information report. Ini satu keadaan yang biasa terlalu. Polis dapat maklumat, terus pergi buat tangkapan, terus buat siasat, terus ambil tindakan. Report tu not reduced in writing. Kan? Kalau ada orang datang belajar, tolong polis, orang ni nak kerjakan saya, polis pun terus ambil tindakan. Takkanlah polis nak kata, okey, pergi balai dulu, buat report dulu, dan baru saya nak pergi tangkap orang tu. Tapi kalau berlaku kejadian ragut, lepas tu polis tak nak buat apa-apa, oh tak ada report, dia kata kan, nanti kalau saya tangkap peragut tu pun tangkapan saya tak sah sebab tiada laporan boleh dibuat. That's the logic kalau ikut apa yang dikatakan oleh magistrate ni lah. Kalau nak tunggu laporan baru boleh buat tindakan. So kalau berlaku jana ragut, tangkap dan ragut. Tapi that report is no longer a first information report. You see tak? So keadaan ni selalu berlaku dalam kes yang mana kadang dalam satu siasatan polis buat tindakan, dia buat laporan untuk rekod apa yang dia buat. Dia dah dapat maklumat bahawa orang ini mengedar dadah, dia pergi tangkap mengedar dadah tu. Dah balik baru dia buat report kata, oh saya telah menangkap seorang bernama Sian yang kita caki telah mengedar dadah dan sebagainya. Question is, that report is it a first information report or not? So kalau dia first information report, is admissible. Tapi kalau dia bukan first information report, is not admissible because macam saya sebut tadi, the law membenarkan first information report which is hearsay in nature untuk dikemukakan sebagai keterangan sebab dia dibenarkan oleh undang-undang 107 dan sebagainya. Tetapi kalau dia bukan first information report, then it remains hearsay lah. Selalunya yang bukan first information report ni adalah apa yang popularly known dalam kalangan law enforcement sebagai laporan tangkap, report of an arrest. Dapat maklumat, siasat, baru tangkap. So bila dia tangkap, baru dia buat laporan. So that laporan is no longer first information report sebab dia dah dapat information sebelum tu. Itu cuma laporan tangkap. So kadang-kadang boleh dikemukakan, kadang-kadang tidak boleh dikemukakan. Dikemukakan untuk menyokong bila polis kata saya telah tangkap seseorang. So untuk bukti saya tangkap dia, ini laporan tangkap dia. Dari soalah, contents dia masih lagi tak boleh dipertikaikan. Konten dia masih remain hearsay. Tetapi dalam keadaan Fong Chi Chiong ni adalah satu keadaan. Tetapi dalam keadaan lain, dalam keadaan lain yang mana yang berkait, kalau kita tengok dalam kes Fong Chi Chiong tadi, dia ada sebut pasal 114G Evidence Act, adverse inference. I hope you all know apa benda itu adverse inference dan apa kaitan antara police report ni dengan adverse inference. Okay, sebelum kita pergi pada topik tu, let's just go through kes Tan Cheng Kui again. Dalam Tan Cheng Kui, accused was convicted by magistrate court charged of extortion. FIR was verbal and not reduced to writing as required under section 107 CBC. Keadaan yang saya cakap tadi. No FIR in writing was produced as evidence at the trial. Accused appeal, Chang Ming Tat, approved Fong Chi Chiong, held that failure to reduce FIR into writing and failure to reduce its evidence is not factor the prosecution's case, provided the public prosecutor can establish a prima facie case. Ini penting. Provided the public prosecutor can establish a prima facie case. However, it is better if the prosecution case solely rests fully on the FIR. So dalam kes you ada keterangan lain, you tak ada masalah untuk membuktikan kes. Pendakwaan tak ada masalah membuktikan kes sebab dia banyak keterangan lain yang boleh establish. I hope you know what I mean by membuktikan kes, which is cukup keterangan untuk mewujudkan fakta, dan fakta itu boleh establish the ingredients of the offence. The ingredients of the offence, they are facts to prove the ingredients of facts, and those facts are obtained from evidence by the witnesses and all. So kalau cukup keterangan, establish fakta, boleh wujudkan ciri-ciri kesalahan, no problem. Tak ada police report pun tak ada masalah. Tetapi dalam keadaan-keadaan yang mana police report itu adalah penting, satu-satunya keterangan yang ada, and you tak kemukakan keterangan. Yes, kes dah dibuang bukan sebab tak ada FIR, sebab you fail to establish a prima facie case. This is what yang cuba di-explain dalam kes Tan Cheng Kui oleh Justice Chan Min Tat. You boleh baca dia. Apa yang saya sebut tadi adalah kesimpulan daripada this passage. Although of great importance, the omission of first information report does not, however, appear per se to be fatal to the prosecution. Tak semestinya tak ada report terus fatal. No. In Ui Hock Leong, Spencer Wilkinson J, while deploring the omission is a very serious on the record evidence other than the complaint of the offence accused and dismissed appeal against conviction. Public prosecutor for Chi Cheong was of the same mind. He held that the fact that no first information report was made was not itself a ground for throwing out a case. No information report itself is not a ground for throwing out a case. Case of Leong is, however, distinguishable and was distinguished by the learned trial judge from the earlier case of Ching King Seong. And it's clear from his explanation that where the case against the accused depended entirely on the evidence of the complainant, the failure to produce the first information report deprived the accused opportunity to cross-examine his accuser, and the circumstances of presumption that sexual forgery evidence must be raised and the report be unfavorable to the prosecution. The rationale was found in the case of Teo Ting Chan, where the appeal against conviction was allowed. Kemudian kes Abdul Razak Adwari cited and adopted the views in Tan Cheng Kui. On Chi Cheong, he also held the failure to produce FIR as evidence and the trial was not fatal to prosecution case, provided prosecutor can establish a prima facie case without reliance on the FIR. In this case, the accused was charged by taking a section 59B. After public prosecutor's case, defense counsel submitted the prosecutor failed to prove prima facie case against the accused as no FIR produced as evidence. James Fu JC acquitted the accused without calling for a defense because the public prosecutor depended solely on the FIR failure to abuse his as evidence of factor. Okay, apa maksud di sini? Okay, saya cuba explain. Macam saya cakap tadi, FIR, First Information Report, itu bukanlah requirement. Tak ada pun tak apa. Kalau keterangan pihak pendakwaan mencukupi untuk establish the ingredients of the offence, to establish facts, and the facts will establish the ingredients of the offence. Tetapi dalam keadaan contoh-contoh yang saya sebut sebelum ni, yang FIR tu suddenly becomes very material, selalunya dalam case where there is only one witness and that witness is very important, dia sahaja yang boleh menentukan break or make of the case, and dia punya keterangan pula suspect. Keterangan dia suspect ni keterangan dia ada sikit goyang, sepatutnya boleh diperkuatkan dengan first information report, tetapi tiada first information report dikemukakan. So dia punya keterangan remains goyang, keterangan dia remains not credible, and kalau keterangan dia chemical without any other evidence, dia not sufficient. So case acquitted not because of tak ada first information report per se, tetapi because without that first information report, the credibility of the witness is affected, and if the evidence rely only on that witness, then the prosecution has failed to prove a prima facie case. So contoh terbaik macam saya bagi tadi ada macam kes Rombol tadi lah, yang awal saya cerita tadi. Bayangkan dalam keadaan isu dia adalah consent, and then police report was not tendered, sedangkan dia tidak dapat meyakinkan mahkamah tanpa keterangan-keterangan lain bahawa she did not consent to the offence. Contohnya, dia yang ikut budak lelaki tu, dia yang pergi kat rumah budak lelaki tu, dia yang pergi tidur kat situ. So kemudian dia kata dia tak ada konsent. Boleh, macam saya cakap tadi, tak semestinya dia buat semua benda tu bermakna dia consented. Tetapi in the face of what the accused kata dia consented, dia tak ada consented, that police report suddenly becomes important because it can corroborate dia punya case, and for some reason kalau police report itu tidak ada ataupun tidak dikemukakan, dan ada masalah lah pada kes pendakwaan. And then dalam kes Tan Cheng Kui dan juga kes Bala Chandra ni, it goes further, di mana pihak pembelaan menghujahkan bahawa you ada police report, tetapi police report itu tidak dikemukakan. Jadi pihak pembelaan argue saying that oleh sebab ianya tidak kemukakan, maka anggapan boleh dibuat di bawah Seksyen 114G bahawa polis report itu kalau dikemukakan tidak akan menyokong keterangan saksi. You will only understand what I'm saying kalau you dah belajar evidence on the topic of Section 114G Evidence Act. Section 114G Evidence Act ni kalau you tengok adalah bermaksud kalau ada satu keterangan itu yang boleh dikemukakan tetapi tanpa apa-apa penjelasan, tanpa sebab tidak dikemukakan, bermakna anggapan boleh dibuat keterangan itu jika dikemukakan tidak akan berpihak kepada pihak. So the defense is trying to say you have the police report, boleh dikemukakan tapi tak tahu kenapa you tak kemukakan, bermakna anggapan adalah terpakai police report itu jika dikemukakan tidak menyokong keterangan saksi itu. So I hope you understand what I'm saying here. So banyaklah kes yang berkaitan dengan Section 4G ni, pemakaian dia tertakluk beberapa syarat jugalah. Antaranya tak ada oblik motif, bukan sengaja tidak kemukakan tetapi sebab tak mampu untuk kemukakan. So dalam keadaan-keadaan macam ni 114G tidak terpakai because the law as to 114G whether it's applicable to the facts of the circumstances of a case itself adalah bergantung daripada satu kes ke satu kes. Okey, dalam kes Bala Chandra, argument macam yang saya beritahu tadi. Court consider the issue whether the failure to adduce FIR at the trial would trigger an adverse influence against the prosecution under Section 114G of the Evidence Act 1950. I'm not sure whether you dah belajar atau tidak. Tapi my lecture now is based on you dah faham apa itu Section 114G. Kalau you tak faham, you can ask me secara terus. With this regard, the court pointed out Section 134 Evidence Act, which provides that no particular number of witnesses shall in any case be required for the proof of any fact. Thus, the evidence of a witness is not required to be corroborated in law in all cases. It may be desirable to be so corroborated in certain circumstances of the case, certain circumstances or due to the facts of each case. Ini pun question evidence. Section 134 Evidence Act kata bukan the number of the witness yang penting. You panggil 10 saksi untuk menceritakan satu perkara yang sama, nilai keterangan 10 saksi itu sama juga dengan satu orang saksi yang menceritakan perkara yang serupa. It's not the number of witness yang boleh menentukan. Kalau begitu senang lah, panggil saksi ramai-ramai semua, oh boleh menang kes. That's not the case. It's quality over quantity. Apa yang saksi itu ceritakan adalah menentukan sama ada value nilai keterangan dia. Berat keterangan dia bergantung kepada apa yang cerita oleh saksi itu, bergantung pada credibility dia, bukan bilangan saksi. So dia cakap pasal corroboration. Bukan semua case require corroboration. Kalau you baca Evidence Act, there are only certain cases yang require corroboration as a matter of rule sebelum keterangan boleh terima. Contoh child witness. Child witness perlukan corroboration sebelum keterangan dia boleh diterima. Bukan tak boleh terima keterangan child, seorang kanak-kanak, keterangan tanpa corroboration tetap boleh diterima. Tetapi setelah mahkamah menyedari, memberi amaran kepada diri sendiri bahawa keterangan ini berbahaya untuk diterima, tapi dia masih terima atas sebab-sebab tertentu. Kena bagi sebab kenapa dia terima keterangan saksi kanak-kanak ni walaupun tanpa corroboration. Sama juga dalam kes, contoh kes rasuah. Kes rasuah ada pemberi dan penerima. Salah seorang akan jadi saksi tapi dia accomplice. So dalam kes-kes yang melibatkan keterangan daripada accomplice, the rule is that it requires corroboration. Bukannya mesti, tetapi kalau mahkamah terima keterangan seorang accomplice tanpa corroboration, dan mahkamah kena bagi reason kenapa dia terima. So accomplice, interested witness, child witness, dalam kes rasuah saya sebut tadi ada provision dalam Akta Pencegahan Rasuah yang mengatakan bahawa tak perlu corroboration dalam kes seorang accomplice. Kenapa? Sebab dia nak mengatasi kedudukan undang-undang ini, mengatakan accomplice is needed bila ada. Sama juga agent provokator juga perlukan corroboration. So bukan semua kes memerlukan corroboration. Cuma dalam keadaan-keadaan tertentu corroboration tu jadi penting. Dan sebelum dia boleh menguatkan kes pendakwaan, tanpa corroboration, kes saksi pendakwaan lemah sebab saksi itu credibility dia terjejas. So I hope you understand the background of this. And based on this background, case Balajendra ni was decided lah. So passage saya baca, it is therefore clear that the need for first information report to be used to corroborate the testimony of witness depends on the facts and circumstances of each particular case. So sama police report adalah corroboration. Bukannya mesti ada collaboration. Dia cuma menjadi perlu dalam keadaan-keadaan tertentu bergantung kepada keadaan fakta dan keadaan satu kes. Where the evidence of a single witness who has made a first information report is vague, it is most desirable to tender in evidence in order to enhance its credibility. Saksi adalah single, seorang je saksi dia. Lepas tu keterangan dia sama-sama vague. So police report tu jadi desirable, bukannya wajib, desirable untuk corroborate. Kalau tidak, keterangan dia tekal sebagai lemah. To corroborate his credibility, kebolehpercayaan dia. That was the basis of the judgment of such cases as Chin Chong and also Wu Hok Leong. Where it's not tendered in evidence in such a situation, the evidence of witness tends to be rejected, not because of lack of corroboration, but because it may not pass the test of credibility and reliability on its own. Apa maknanya? Di sini it means this. Oleh sebab keadaan tadi, saksi tu, dia keterangan dia weak, lemah, credibility dia lemah. Sepatutnya police report tu boleh dikemukakan untuk enhance dia punya credibility, tetapi dianya tidak dikemukakan. So bila tidak dikemukakan, keterangan saksi itu akan kena rejected. Rejected not because of tidak mengemukakan police report atau first information report, tetapi rejected because dia punya credibility adalah lemah. I hope you understand that. Stands to be rejected not because lack of corroboration, bukan sebab tak ada corroboration, tetapi because he failed to pass the test of credibility and reliability. Dia tak credible, dia tak reliable, bukan sebab tak ada corroboration. Dalam keadaan kes lain tak ada corroboration pun masih boleh jadi credible dan reliable. Tapi dalam kes ini dahlah tak credible, tak reliable, corroboration pula tak ada. Okay. It's only that extent can be said that the failure to produce first information report is fatal. Cuma dalam keadaan itu saja failure to produce this first information report fatal. Because bila tak ada first information report, tak ada corroboration. Bila tak ada corroboration, dia kekal not credible, not reliable. Tapi kalau dia memang credible, memang reliable in the first place, tak ada police report pun tak jadi hal. Tak ada corroboration pun tak jadi hal. If indeed it contradicts the evidence of witness, it's a duty of the defense to use it in order to attack credibility of the witness. Where that has not been done, it will be contradiction in terms of the defense to ask for adverse influence to be drawn against the prosecution for failure to use it in evidence. On the contrary, the failure of the defense to use as described may lack the influence that is not adverse to the evidence of the witness. The corollary is that an adverse influence cannot be drawn against the prosecution for failure to tender in evidence a first information report, and that the strength of this case is to be assessed as it stands. The submission advanced by counsel cannot be sustained as the trial judge accepted the evidence of PW1 which was supported by testimony of PW3. The need for PW1's evidence to be corroborated by his police report therefore does not arise. So apa berlaku dalam kes ni? Pertama, defense argue police report ada tapi tidak dikemukakan. Maka macam saya beritahu tadi, Dia argue pada mahkamah, mahkamah patut memakai anggapan di bawah Seksyen 114G bahawa polis report itu jika dikemukakan tidak akan mencukup keterangan oleh, dalam kes ni, PW1. Yes, PW1. Keterangan PW1, saksi PW1 dalam kes ni, dalam kes Bala Chandra ni. So this is the argument by the counsel dalam kes ni lah. So menjawab isu ni, mahkamah kata first there is no need for corroboration kalau orang tu memang credible dan reliable. Corroboration required cuma kalau dia not credible, not reliable. And kalau the only corroboration is the police report, tak ada police report, then remains uncorroborated. Uncorroborated mana dia remains not credible, not reliable. So argument by counsel dalam kes ni, police report tidak dikemukakan, therefore anggapan terpakai bahawa dia adalah polis report tu jika dikemukakan tidak akan menyokong keterangan dia. Dalam lain keadaan ada contradiction. So mahkamah kata dalam kes yang mana tidak perlukan corroboration, dia memang reliable, tak ada polis report pun tidak menjejaskan keterangan dia. Tidak boleh nak memakai anggapan bahawa polis report itu jika dikemukakan tidak akan menyokong kes penawaran itu, because kalaulah betul polis report itu bercanggah dengan keterangan di mahkamah, pihak pembelaan sendiri yang patut kemukakan polis report tu. So the fact that pihak pendakwaan tidak mengemukakan polis report tu, it means that polis report itu tidak bercanggah. Berbelit-belit ke? Kalau you follow slowly, kalau boleh follow apa yang saya kata daripada awal tadi, dia tak berbelit sangat. Tapi kalau you ambil tengah-tengah this lecture ni, you tebuk sikit tengah-tengah, memang berbelit-belit lah. Saya cuba explain lagi sekali. Defense kata, oh you tak tender police report. You tak tender police report, therefore anggapan adalah anggapan Section 114G adalah police report itu tidak menyokong keterangan saksi. Mahkamah pula kata, jawapan mahkamah, kalau ada percanggahan dalam polis report tu, kenapa pihak pembelaan sendiri tak kemukakan polis report tu? The fact that pihak pembelaan tak kemukakan makna tak ada percanggahan lah. So it's actually counter, terbalik pemakaian Section 114G, mahkamah kata. So this, jawapan mahkamah ni adalah on the premise that police report, satu salinan police report ada di dalam milik pihak pembelaan. Ini satu isu yang saya lupa nak mention tadi. Sesuatu zaman, saya break sekejap dari cerita pasal Ever Secrets ni, nak cerita sikit sejarah. Zaman dulu-dulu, apabila satu police report itu dibuat terhadap seseorang, orang yang terhadapnya report itu dibuat, dia tak boleh dapat satu salinan police report. That means that if there is a police report made against you, you cannot get a copy of that report. Cuma orang yang buat report tu dia boleh dapat salinan. Orang yang terhadap dia di report tu dia tak boleh dapat salinan. So dia tak tahu kes apa benda terhadap aku, apa report terhadap aku. So faham tak the situation? Katakanlah satu report dibuat terhadap Ali oleh Abu boleh dapat salinan tu sebab dia buat report, tapi Ali tak boleh dapat walaupun Ali yang jadi subject matter dari report tu. Sehinggalah keputusan dalam kes Anthony Gomez. Dalam kes Anthony Gomez, mahkamah membuat keputusan bahawa orang yang terhadapnya report dibuat ada kepentingan. Oleh sebab ada kepentingan, maka dia berhak mendapat satu salinan polis report itu untuk dia membela diri dia terhadap apa yang dilakukan di dalam polis report itu. So sekarang ni keputusan kes ni keadaan ni dah tak timbul lagi sebab dah ada Section 51A. Kita akan cerita benda tajuk ni kemudian. Dah ada Section 51 semua yang CPC sendiri memberikan hak kepada orang yang terhadapnya report itu dibuat untuk mendapat satu salinan terhadap police report. Sebab kita dah ada discovery, fitra proses dah ada discovery. Orang yang terhadap dia dibuat report polis berhak mendapatkan satu salinan report polis itu. So atas premis inilah mahkamah dalam kes Bala Chandra ni kata, you pun ada satu polis report tu, kalau bercanggah kenapa you sendiri tak tender kan? So kalau you tak tender maknanya tak ada percanggahan. Tambah lagi dalam kes ini, keterangan PW1 ni bukannya not credible ataupun not reliable sebab PW1 ni keterangan dia disokong, supported by another witness, that is PW3. Itu kes Bala Chandra. Okey. As a result, the court will only draw an adverse inference against a failure of the prosecution to produce an FIR in evidence if the defense has attacked the credibility of witness in relation to his testimonial evidence which is uncorroborated. Otherwise, the failure of prosecution to produce the FIR is not fatal, as the court would be of the view that the testimony of the witness, if believed not being rebutted by any party in the trial, is sufficient to establish any fact. Evidence untuk establish fact, macam saya beritahu tadi. Kalau evidence sufficient untuk establish fact, tak ada FIR pun tak jadi hal. Tapi dalam keadaan adverse inference, court will only draw adverse inference against a failure of prosecution to abuse FIR in evidence if the defense has attacked the credibility of witness in relation to his testimony evidence which is uncorroborated. Defense attack testimony of the witness, credibility dia attack, peguam mencabar masa masa pemeriksaan balas. Saya katakan kepada kamu, keterangan kamu berikan pada hari ini adalah tidak benar. Apa yang berlaku bukan seperti yang kamu katakan di mahkamah ini. Apa yang berlaku sebenarnya ada seperti ini. Kemudian saksi itu tak setuju. Apa yang saya cakap betul. Kalau betul apa yang kamu katakan ini, ada tak kamu buat laporan atas perkara yang sama seperti kamu katakan ini dan mahkamah dalam laporan polis kamu? Dalam keadaan itu mungkin seperti apa yang dinyatakan di sini, pihak pendakwaan nak jawab senang je. Kemukakan untuk menjawab hujah tu, kemukakan saja laporan polis. Kalau saksi tu kata, ya saya dah cerita dah dalam laporan polis dulu, so apa pendakwaan perlu buat kan? Kemukakan masa re-examination, pemeriksaan semula, kamu kata kamu telah ceritakan kejadian hari ya seperti dalam kamu terangkan tadi dalam laporan polis kamu. Ya, inikah laporan polis kamu. That's it, boleh jawab. So, tapi kalau dah kena cabar kredibiliti dia, tapi masih tak nak kemukakan dia punya laporan polis, walaupun laporan polis boleh menekor, then apa inference buat? Inference dia kata tak ada laporan polis lah. Okay, case of Wadi was held at FIR only to be tendered in court certain circumstances where the oral evidence witness has vague and convincing. Repeat apa benda yang cakap tadi. Tak jelas, tak meyakinkan terangan dia. Sepatutnya FIR boleh tolong, tapi FIR tak dikemukakan. Dalam keadaan macam tu sahaja, yang mana kegagalan mengemukakan FIR adalah faktor kepada kes penawaran. Okey, admissibility of FIR. Saya dah sentuh tadi sedikit tentang admissibility of FIR. Saya nak ringkaskan saja di sini sebab saya rasa kalau you baca pun you boleh faham. Dalam kes pendakwa raya lawan Kang Husu, issue arose as to whether a report which is not FIR is admissible in section 108A of the CPC. 108A of the CPC is actually about admission of certified information or evidence. Ini terbalik pula. Any proceeding under this code, entry relating to information reduce the writing of the provision section 107 property certificate to copy bla 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 bla. Ini adalah assignment police report yang saya beritahu tadi. Police report adalah hearsay tetapi provision under CPC membolehkan ianya dikemukakan, dan dalam section dia 108A yang boleh kemukakan bukan saja boleh kemukakan tapi boleh kemukakan salinan. A certified true copy of police report tak payah original boleh kemukakan dalam 108A. Tetapi dalam beberapa kes ada masanya tadi argument kata kegagalan mengemukakan argument by a defense adalah kegagalan mengemukakan FIR. Tetapi now the other argument pula mengatakan FIR tidak boleh dikemukakan walaupun di bawah section 108. So macam mana boleh timbul keadaan ni? Kan tadi isu dia tentang failure to produce the FIR. Sekarang ni objection to the production of FIR. The other way, the other opposite. An issue arose as to whether a report which is not FIR is admissible as section 108A dalam kes penawaran ini. Active formation, the police set up roadblock, searching, found the legislature, accused or arrested, police station, report was put out, seizure, defense, blah 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 blah. The defense, relying on Tan Cheng Koo, contended that the failure to produce a report as evidence was fatal to the prosecution's case. Shankar J. opined that report was an arrest report and not a FIR, as such was not admissible under section 108 of the CPC. Thus, the failure to produce a arrest report was evidence was not fatal to the prosecution's case. Kita sekejap. accused or charged under Section 35B, prosecution attempted to tender police report made by third prosecution witness, defense objected to its admissibility as was not FIR. Ni yang saya maksudkan tadi, kes Ismail bin Attan. Dalam kes Ismail bin Attan, accused kena tuduh Section 39B. Prosecution attempted to tender a police report made by third prosecution witness, one of the reading officers. Salah seorang pegawai menangkap itu ingin kemukakan satu laporan polis yang dibuat, tetapi pihak pembelaan, the defense objected to its admissibility as it was not FIR. Pembelaan kata, oh tak boleh masuk report ni because dia bukan first information report. James pun ruled that report in case was not FIR and such not admissible Section 108. Kenapa dia kata not FIR? Sebab dia dah dapat maklumat awal, pergi tangkap, dia buat report. Jadi report itu cuma satu report tangkapan, bukan information as to the commission of the offence. It's actually a report of the arrest that he was making. So it's no longer first information report. So Justice James pun kata bukan di bawah section, tak termasuk bawah section 108A, not first information report, therefore not admissible. So ni defense argue is saying that it was not admissible. Sama juga dalam kes Rohani Ahmad, not information relating to commission offence and which section 107, hence the report not admissible under section ni. Lepas tu sama juga kes Nasaruddin Daud, dangerous drug. On the facts of the police received information that accused of selling ganja by informer, the police then posed undercover by fire and negotiated with the police union, blah 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 blah. It was admitted by the police that it had not reduced any information to writing. Court held there was no report of offence made, but instead was information leading police conducting investigation which led to a threat. Therefore, it's not a condition precedent to initiate the proceeding. Summary, if the report is not FIR, in summary, if the report is not FIR, it's not admissible under section 108A. Okay, saya nak cerita pula tentang Nasaruddin Daud dengan Kang Husoh. Dalam kes Kang Husoh dengan Nasaruddin bin Daud, dia argument terbalik daripada kes Ismail bin Attan dengan Rohani Ahmad. Dalam Ismail Attan dengan Rohani Ahmad ni, pihak pendakwaan ingin kemukakan laporan yang dikatakan sebagai FIR, tetapi pihak pembelaan membantah dan mahkamah setuju bahawa ianya bukan FIR. Tetapi di dalam Nasaruddin Daud dan juga Kang Husoh, dia terbalik. Pihak pendakwaan tidak mengemukakan the FIR. Dan pihak pembelaan membangkitkan isu macam lebih awal tadi, kegagalan mengemukakan adalah menyebabkan kes jadi lemah. Digunakan argument yang macam kes saya sebut tadilah, Bala Chandra dan sebagainya. So dua-dua pun tak betul. Kalau katakanlah you jadi prosecutor, kalau you tender, pihak pembelaan akan bantah saying that this is not first information report. Kalau you tak tender pula, pihak pembelaan akan jadikan isu kenapa failure to produce a first information report, so therefore no probation dan sebagainya. So dua-dua pun tak betul. Tapi apa mahkamah kata? So dalam kes Kang Husoh, apa mahkamah kata? Justice Shankar opined that the report was an arrest report and not FIR. As such, was not admissible under section 108A. Thus, the failure to produce a report as evidence was not fatal for such a case. So, apa yang Shankar J kata? Basically, maksud dia macam inilah. Tak apa, tak tender pun tak apa. Kenapa? Sebab dia bukan first information report tu. So, pihak pendakwaan, dia buat tangkapan. Kemudian dia buat laporan atas tangkapan tu. Dia tidak kemukakan laporan tu. Pihak pembelaan argue kata failure to produce actually factor the prosecution case, tetapi hakim mengatakan bahawa that is not a first information report. It was just satu report tangkapan. So failure to produce pun tak menjejaskan kes pendakwaan. Bukan failure to produce, memang tak boleh produce in the first place. It's not first information report, so it's just a hearsay punya report, so tak boleh dikemukakan bawah section 108A. Sama juga dalam kes Nasaruddin Daud, the court held that there was no report of an offence made, but instead was information leading to police investigation, conducting investigation which led to the threat. In addition, FIR is not condition to initiate criminal proceeding. So sama juga dalam kes ni, mahkamah polis terima maklumat, bertindak atas maklumat tu, dia buat tangkapan, buat serbuan. Bila buat serbuan dia jumpa dadah, dan tertuduh dalam kes ini dia telah dituduhkan dengan mengedar dadah berkaitan. So argument yang dibangkitkan adalah tiada laporan polis. So mahkamah kata laporan polis is not syarat untuk memulakan satu siasatan. Lepas tu, yes, laporan polis itu was not actually, the court had, there was no report of an offence, but instead information leading. Ni, tiada laporan, tindakan polis bukan atas satu laporan tapi atas satu maklumat. Apa beza laporan dengan maklumat kat sini? The court had that there was no report of an offence, but instead it was just information. Polis menerima maklumat apa yang didengar daripada orang yang tak dikenali, ada orang misteri ataupun daripada siasatan dia sendiri, dia menyamar jadi whatsoever, dia dapat maklumat so and so menyedak dadah. Memang tak ada report pun. Mana ada orang yang come forward kata oh si so and so ni mengedar dadah, therefore polis pergi tangkap dan sebagainya. So mahkamah bagi dua sebab kat sini. Satu, dia kata memang tak ada report dalam kes ni, cuma polis bertindak atas maklumat. Tiada laporan yang dibuat di bawah Seksyen 17 oleh sesiapa pun, cuma tindakan polis atas maklumat. Dan polis boleh bertindak di atas maklumat because the report is not actually a requirement for the police to initiate an investigation. Yes, a report will initiate investigation, but tak ada report pun boleh initiate investigation. There's nothing wrong with it. So that's what the court is saying dalam kes Nasaruddin Medal. So you tengok the very layers of situation, circumstances ni dalam keadaan macam mana polis pendakwaan gagal kemukakan report, apa mahkamah kata. Dalam keadaan yang mana pendakwaan nak kemukakan report tapi polis pembelaan bantah, apa mahkamah kata. Dalam keadaan memang tak ada report pun in the first place, apa mahkamah kata. So these are the various situation. So this various situation saya terangkan secara ringkas. You have to do up your own reading to understand further on this thing, and you have to do your own revision. So untuk disimpulkan apa yang saya dah cerita hari ini, untuk kesimpulan dia, you boleh tengok kes Anwar bin Abdul Aziz, which is at page 159 of your textbook. Kes Anwar Abdul Aziz at page 159, 2005 6CLJ 309. Decision by Lau Hok Beng. Lau Hok Beng dia summarize dengan merujuk kepada kes Balachandran, kes segala-segala yang telah saya refer tadi, kes Balachandran, kes Lim Guan Eng pun ada, kes Tang Cheng Kui, kes Chin Kin Siong dan sebagainya. Summary of the principles governing police report dalam dan kaitannya dengan siasatan dan keterangan. Okey. Last kali dalam your textbook, whether the accused entitled to a copy of FIR, jawapan dia sekarang ni no brainer, yes, entitled. Dulu-dulu banyak kes yang discuss whether entitled or not entitled, because dulu-dulu atas argument pihak pendakwaan dan pihak siasatan kata tak nak siasatan diganggu. Diorang takut siasatan dia atau pendakwaan dia diganggu kalau laporan polis dapat kepada orang yang disyaki, yang terhadapnya dituduh, kemungkinan ada orang itu akan cuba mengganggu siasatan dengan menghilangkan keterangan. Kalau dia tahu ada dia disiasat atau ada report dibuat terhadap dia, dia mungkin akan mengganggu siasatan dengan menghilangkan keterangan, mengganggu saksi dan sebagainya. So because of this, the prosecution and the police at that time refuse untuk bagi laporan polis kepada the other side, and dia orang akan pergi ke mahkamah untuk dapatkan satu salinan laporan polis. So you boleh tengok decision mahkamah dalam kes yang tadi komen yang membenarkan kes Rusdi, yang tidak membenarkan a fishing expedition, Ada kes yang benarkan, ada kes yang tak benarkan, tapi isu ini telah diselesaikan dengan amendment to section 51A yang membenarkan satu salinan laporan polis diberikan kepada orang yang terhadapnya dibuat laporan polis itu. Maknanya tertuduh lah. Okey. Homework. Kenapa saya kena bagi homework? Sebab kita tak ada tutorial. Selalunya apa yang di saya lecture ni akan dibincang semula dalam tutorial, tetapi agak sukar untuk mengadakan tutorial because keadaan kita sekarang ni. So sebagai ganti dia, saya bagi you just a short, not to say test, not to say assignment lah, boleh kata assignment, just a short assignment, just satu write up lebih kurang dalam 500 perkataan. 500 perkataan biasanya 2 muka surat kan, 2 muka surat A4 tu dalam 500 perkataan, just a short one. And the write up atas tajuk ataupun menjawab soalan dia adalah, okay, take this down. What is the evidentiary value of a first information report? What is the evidentiary value of a first information report? Which is basically tajuk lecture saya hari ini. So jawapan dia, you have to read case yang saya sebut tadi, decision by Lau Hok Beng, dia ada cerita kat situ. So you read and you produce balik. That's all you buat. Kalau you setakat copy and paste tu nampak sangatlah copy and paste kan, because I am the one who give the lecture, and I am also boleh baca decision daripada case Anwar Abdul Aziz by Lau Hok Beng. So I nak you olah dengan dibaca dan you keluarkan balik dengan cara you tersendiri ikut kefahaman you, and I will evaluate you based on your understanding of what I lecture hari ni and also what the decision dalam Anwar Abdul Aziz explain. So kalau you boleh keluarkan balik ikut kefahaman dia, I will grade you based on that. So tapi kalau copy and paste tu nampak sangatlah copy and paste, which I cannot give mark to copy and paste lah. Tapi kalau perkataan you sendiri, I will know lah dia adalah perkataan you sendiri. So I will grade your understanding. And okay, tajuk dia, what is the evidentiary value of a first information report? And then tak payah panjang, dalam 500 perkataan. And then jawapan itu email kepada saya dalam masa 2 minggu, 2 weeks. 2 weeks maknanya itulah, saya pun tak ingat hari ni berapa bulan lah. 2 weeks from now, that means hari Khamis minggu depan. Minggu lagi sekali hari Khamis. Okay, your email seperti mana I punya email dalam USIM punya email, ahmadrosli@usim.edu.my. Okay, so that's it untuk lecture hari ini. So I think I've covered about 2 hours lecture. This is to make up for your jumlah jam pembelajaran juga. This lecture is also counted as jumlah jam pembelajaran. And then the assignment yang you bagi itu is also necessary for the purpose of continuous evaluation, because kita punya cara baru belajar sekarang ni adalah melalui online dan juga continuous evaluation. So these are all for your marks at the end of this semester. So make sure semua buat lah. And kepada siapa yang tidak ada di dalam list members of Microsoft Teams tu, boleh suruh dia join sekali, because this video saya akan edarkan melalui Microsoft Teams and also melalui WhatsApp. So itu saja. Any question you can ask me direct dalam WhatsApp punya group. So thank you so much, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.